So the first thing we're going to touch on is going to be, again, as I've mentioned, clear business objectives, right? At the end of the day, if we're moving just to move, that's not a business objective, and we're going to ultimately fail. So let's go understand, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to reduce CapEx? Is it for scalability or flexibility? Is it for improved performance? I mean, in some cases that can be a reality as well. Is it for the speed of innovation, right? We need to make sure that we clearly understand what the business is trying to get out of this transition, how it helps facilitate what they're trying to get done as an organization and their objectives, and then how do we map those capabilities back and ensure that we're able to deliver upon them. So at the end of the day, when we do the migration, it's a success, and we're not going up there to just turn around and rip it all back out, because that nobody wants to spend that cycle energy and effort and lost opportunity costs doing something that we didn't align properly first, and then we end up with somebody's not happy with it. We have to go back and rip it all back out. All right. So this is probably the most critical part of this, and this is where generally where we may have a little bit of help on the business side, or at least help steer that conversation with the internal IT organization and the business. But this is usually where we get engaged, right? And this is, how do we assess the existing environment? Most of the cloud providers have tools. In particular, we predominantly are working out of Azure. We can't work out the other ones, but that's one we most generally work with, because most everybody has our existing Azure investment. You have Entra ID, you have O365, right? Logical continue down that path, leveraging services you've already kind of invested in. Azure has an Azure Migration Tool. It's a free service. We can help you get it configured and set up, get it inventorying your apps and data in the environment, and then it helps project kind of what does that roadmap look like. So this is something where we come in, we help set that configuration up. We're going to let it run for, again, ideally 30 to 45 days. We want to see that, end of month cycle, things like that, business trends in the environment. And then we can get an idea of, hey, okay, based upon your actual usage and data, here's what it might look like. Here's the opportunities to maybe move to a SQL as a service, the PaaS instance of SQL, versus you having, servers within SQL licensing and then having to manage the infrastructure, the patching, and everything else. Maybe we look at moving it to a PaaS instance, right? So there's some opportunities that we look at. We analyze that data and come back with, okay, here's what it might look like to start moving or segmenting things into the cloud. We look at costs. I mean, cost is a big part of this, right? We said, generally speaking, you're not maybe cost neutral, but this is not a cost savings, but we still need to understand the cost. What are we looking at monthly? Where are the costs at? Is there anything we can do to bring those costs down? And there's a couple different things. Again, if you're just swiping the credit card and putting a VM in Azure, I can tell you right now, you've done it wrong. You're paying way too much for that VM. There's a number of different things when you go and methodically go through this. We can help reduce those costs by using things like Azure Hybrid Benefits and reserved instances to significantly reduce those costs. Because if it's a VM you're going to run for 3 years, let's go commit it for 3 years, and you can bring your costs down. So that's a big part of what we do here as well. Again, connectivity needs, this is huge. There are things like Azure Express Route that allow us to get a very high speed, low latency connection into Azure Backplane. Do we need that? I don't know. That's part of the evaluation cycle process that we go through. And then obviously security and compliance, this is always big. It's unfortunate the state of the world we live in, but threat actors are real, and they continue to get more and more prolific and prevalent. And we always have to take that in consideration no matter where we're at and what we're doing. So again, once we've kind of determined what we have and how we're going to transition and make it, then the question is it going to go public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, or multi-cloud? So again, this is really kind of aligning with what are the app and data requirements? Where can it live? What are the dependencies? Again, that's that whole assessment piece we have to go through. And that's a fairly invasive process. Like I said, this is not, I'm going to do this tomorrow. This is hey, let's get started 12, 18 months in advance of a potential opportunity and lay out that groundwork and framework. And that's where we've been successful with customers making transitions to the cloud, is having a strategy and making sure that every decision that the business and IT makes over the next 18 to 24 months is in line with that transition to cloud. I've had some customers say, hey, we want to get to cloud, but then they purchase infrastructure, hardware, and equipment and put it on the data center. I'm like, okay, well, you said you wanted to get to cloud, but we've made purchases and or decisions that are directly contradictive to that, what we're trying to get accomplished. So again, we want to make sure we're in alignment with everyone in the organization about how we're trying to get there, and make sure that we put that lens, if we're truly trying to get to cloud, on everything that we're trying to get accomplished. So again, and here's kind of how do we look to move those workloads, if we identify them and those requirements, into these various components, right? Whether it be public, private, hybrid, or multi-cloud. It's really kind of the 6 R's, right? So the very first one, and this is the most costly one, don't do it. I've seen people do it. It it can be done, but you're going to pay more for it, right? This is lift and shift. This is literally you're going to migrate that VM as it is into a t-shirt size instance inside of Azure and just spin it up and call it a day and walk away. That's the most ineffective way to do that. Typically what we see a lot of times if you have an on-prem environment and you have, again, a hardware refresh, whatever it might be, most commonly what we're looking at is a replatform. And this is where we're going to lift and tinker, right? This is where we evaluate things like, hey, you have a file server on your on-prem environment. When we go to Azure, we can consume native Azure files, a platform as a service solution that gives us file capabilities without having to have a Windows OS that we have to manage and patch and maintain and the security architecture around that, right? There's things like that we want to look at and evaluate. And when we do that, we're now moving and shifting that data into those new capabilities, right? And platform capabilities that we didn't have before because it didn't exist in our platform on premises in our VMware or Hyper-V or Nutanix environment. This is where we have to go back and look at, okay, now we can lift and tinker and configure these things. The next one is refactor. And this is the one that I think is probably, I have some organizations doing this, but this is a very long road, right? You have to be committed to this. You have to have a DevOps team. This is basically, you're going to redesign all of your apps to run natively in the cloud with native app integrations, data plane controls in the cloud, everything else, right? You're going to completely redesign everything for that cloud factor. In most, especially for the SMB, smaller organizations that we work with, especially more on the managed services side, what we find is that typically you're going to be leveraging off-the-shelf software, or again, looking at the next piece, which is going to be replaced, the SaaS alternatives, right? Because you're not going to be developing a lot of times apps in the environment. So typically refactor is one we don't see a lot of. It is absolutely a strategy, but it's usually going to be more at the larger enterprise scale. Replace is a pretty common one, and we try to look at this whenever we can, right? This is the opportunity when we're doing transitions to look at, okay, we've always had a server and app to do this, but is there a way to do this from a SaaS perspective? Or is there another app out there that will let us do it from a SaaS perspective that maybe brings additional benefits, right? And maybe that's a better play to have, kind of have some of those. Again, this is where we may get into looking at, hey, what's your accounting backend? Okay, it's QuickBooks. Well, maybe we look at QuickBooks Cloud, right? There's things like that we have conversations around and try to understand. One of the things we see a lot too is, do we retain or retire it? In environments where we've historically kind of just brought things along. We've had these old environments. We've got these old apps. We've got that server that, Bob in 99 spun up and it's got some data where nobody knows what it's for, but we hate to get rid of it because we don't want to lose it, right? Part of the process is going through and evaluating, what data do we have? Do we still need it? Is it pertinent? Can we move someplace else? So there are a lot of evaluating, retain and retire. In a lot of cases, we'll see, a quarter to a third, maybe stuff that was just in the environment that we could actually shut down and get rid of or retire out by making a couple of changes and moving to some of the other platform capabilities that are in the cloud. And the final one is right size. And this one, I think Daryl was, this originally started as the 5R slide, and we were kind of talking with Daryl, and Daryl was adamant, this has got to be 6, right? We got to talk about right size, because this is the big thing, right? If you look on-prem and you say, hey, I've got a 2 vCPU, 8 gigs of RAM, 250 gig hard disk VM, and you just recreate that in Azure, you've probably already lost from the pricing size, because that's where we bring in those analysis tools. It'll tell us, hey, yeah, you've got 2 vCPUs. You're only using ever 1, right? And you're only ever using 4 gigs of RAM. Well, we can go find that t-shirt VM instance size and right size that VM, deploy it, run it out there, pilot it. If it works well, great. If we hit a situation where performance is slowed down and we need to flip that lever again, to Brian's point, again, it's not everything, but how do we twist that knob? All I've got to do is get a maintenance window, shut that VM down, change the instance size, power it back up, and I've now changed the resources. It's that easy. And that's the real power and capability we get to once we get into the cloud, is that flexibility to make those changes. Daryl, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the key factor. I mean, if you could go back and take a look at some of the losing strategies of cloud, and look at past mistakes, a lot of people will tell you that they didn't right size the stuff the way that it should have been. And so when that first bill came in, because when we do an estimate for this, well, now we actually help everybody right size it. But when we do an estimate, it's still just an estimate. And so you really don't know what it is until it comes in. It'll be pretty close. But again, right sizing of these machines is key to the whole thing. Now, one of the things you have to get used to is looking at higher CPU, right? Because we grew up with 5%, 10% CPU. If we went over 30% of CPU, well, then we started getting nervous. Well, now you're paying for CPU cycles, so you need to ensure that you're getting the most out of those t-shirt size VMs that you can.